Just an absolute tragedy in Charlie Kirk. My heart goes out to his family, relatives, friends, everybody that definitely considers him as a loss. I did a video earlier just indebted to the message that he always did such a great job in sharing. And what was really cool about him is he didn't seem to fear for what he was saying in his safety versus the people out there that are totally countering everything he says and now celebrating his demise and death, which in actuality will probably make him into one of the biggest martyrs we have ever seen in the world. And that won't be able to be stopped. It's those people on the left fanning the flames of hate that they'll turn him into much bigger than he already was. It's just sad that it has to seem to happen this way. One thing that struck me interesting before I get into today's update was the fact that nothing burned down at his loss. It seems like on the left, when things burn down, well, when people are destroyed or killed or however that ends up, it seems like everything seems to be set on fire. There are riots, people in cities are looting and doing all these other sorts of things. Maybe he wasn't that important, but I don't think that were the case. I think it might be the way that the people that followed him were potentially aligned. Maybe they don't believe in going out there and creating a problem for other people, causing damage, stealing and taking things that aren't theirs. Maybe his followers held, at least in some way, some of the same tenets of faith, some of the same beliefs, some of the same core values. Maybe that's where that is. Today is also September 10th is when he died. Today's September 11th. And you remember that day. I was a police officer for the Los Angeles Police Department, and that was quite an awakening moment to see the Twin Towers destroyed and have those other planes hit as a scripted event, something that was made to throw our country off kilter. And I think it did a good job bringing us close, but now we are more divided, it seems. At least that's what I'm seeing in my stream. Maybe you're seeing it as well if you're paying attention. It seems like we're only getting fed things that make us more dug into our present positions, but that's AI for you. So that's going to just continue. When I saw the first video yesterday on Twitter or X that came out of Charlie Kirk being shot, I thought right at the very beginning, I said, it's not true. It's impossible, not true, because AI does a very good job at putting those things together by, of course, by the hand of people that look incredibly real. But come to find out as I scrolled down, it was just one right after another, one right after another. So it was true. In the future, you should vet those things yourselves. You should look at those and make sure that what you're seeing is actually true. I do know that I see people that I appreciate in the world, and they are doing things and saying things that is not commonly them. It's not their trait. It's not the way that they speak, nor it's not about the things that they hold dear and the values that they uphold. It's not true. They're fakes. So please watch out for that. I think in the world of artificial intelligence, this is probably one of the best rules we can mandate for ourselves. It used to be that we trust computers a lot more than people. I think the way that I'm watching this be built out seems like people are starting to maybe wane from that. Maybe that trust for people is coming back in the mix. And I think that's important. All right. As far as Santa Clarita real estate goes, I did do numbers this morning, looking at the values, what's happening as far as Santa Clarita Valley goes, and showing you that 7-day snapshot. I did post 12 coming soon listings. 85 listings have hit the market for sale in the past 24 hours. 98 properties have had their prices changed. 36 properties have gone back on the market. We have 39 properties active under contract, 57 pending, 61 closed, 14 expired, 13 canceled, 17 have been put on hold, 8 have withdrawn. And give you those total numbers. What I do is when I run real estate, I run all residential. I do specific shows and specific talks about condominiums and townhomes as well versus single family residences, and also very city dependent. So Santa Clarita consists of 6 and in some cases 8 cities, depending on how far away from the SCV you decide to go in your search. But the core cities are definitely about 6. I do breakdowns of each of those at SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com so people can see exactly the differences in price point price per square foot, what your money's going to get you, how far it's going to go. One of the things about the real estate update, it will inform you the Fed is definitely talking about lowering that Fed funds rate here the 16th and 17th when they meet this month. That's not far from now. That's 6-7 days from today on the 11th. That's something to watch out for. It looks like it's going to happen, but we've said this 1,000 times because we've been told certain things. This is what I would suggest. If you've been contemplating purchasing real estate, it's definitely the time, at least 6 or 7 days from now, reach out to a lender that reach out to your agent, get some guidance, find out exactly what you should be doing to maybe prepare. If in fact the Fed funds rate is reduced and that does impact if it does impact the mortgage interest rate and we see a large reduction in that sector, it's going to be standing room only for real estate. Right now, inventory at 761, total active listings all across Santa Clarita Valley. 15 of those are coming soon. That's about 746 total active listings currently. That inventory is going to really start to diminish. In addition, there's going to be a lot of sellers out there if in fact the rates drop enough that they're not going to be held as closely to the fire as they have been, because now there'll be a relaxation in the Fed funds rate. It will impact mortgage rates, and the mortgage rate they potentially would be able to get on a next purchase might make sense for them to sell their current property and then to move on. I do know that real estate listings are going to become potentially more expensive depending on how active the buyer's realm is going to be. But if you've been considering purchasing real estate or even selling real estate, now would be the time to maybe start exploring that a little bit deeper with your consummate real estate and lending professional. The first step that I talk about when I give training to other agents is typically they want to be the tip of the spear. They want to be that beginning for anybody that's interested in real estate because they understand the inventory numbers. Then they select and they can refer to different people in different venues that are supportive of the real estate sales or selling process. That would be that next step would be a lender for a buyer. For a real estate seller, potentially it could be a home stager or a pre-staging, a pre-sale home inspector, maybe to come look and walk through the property. But those are usually those best avenues directed to you by your real estate professional. And then after that, that agent, when they're recommending home staging services, for example, for a seller, they should be able to give you information to ask those particular home staging professionals to make sure not only that they're getting their best deal, and there's a lot to be said about cost versus value. I would rather have value a lot of times because it's much longer lasting. Of course, I'm not going to pay through the nose if you have other service professionals that are offering a particular discount rate and they have that same supportive mechanism, the same built-in code and ethical opinions as those other people that might be at a higher price point. You'll probably still be doing fine. But when it comes down to it, looking at the value, that long-term value, being able to connect with them, being able to have them answer your phone, respond to text messages, and also respond to emails and keep you informed, before, during, and after the process, always being there. I think that value is super important. When you're speaking with a lender, if you're a real estate buyer coming via your agent to a particular lender, they should give you questions to ask. They should tell you how to best vet that lender, because although they might be a good fit for the agent because the agent's worked with them in the past, maybe for you, for whatever reason, it's not a great fit. They should have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D that goes with people that are selling their properties, looking at not only the value of the residence, they should be backing this up with true data points, not just conjecture and hope. They should be looking at things that have actually closed, properties that are on the market for sale that are not into escrow. And even the ones that are in escrow, they shouldn't be given much weight at all as far as setting a sales price or a potential value of the property before you put it on the market. It's most important to set the values of that residence on past sold sales. And then also the time frame is also important. Instead of taking the past sold sales from a year ago, you should be able to keep it where an appraiser might look, and that's going to be within the last 180 days. And then you have to factor that in. If you have properties that have been on the market or that sold back 150, 160 days, if it's 150 days, a typical escrow time frame is 30. So you don't want that appraisal to report to not actually come in, because now after the property got into escrow, by the time it's appraised, it's exceeded that 180-day value. If you have a lot of properties that sold a lot less at a closer in time frame that didn't exceed that 180 days by the time that appraisal takes place, you're going to maybe have some kind of a reduction. So that value in that property isn't going to be held as in high regard as those ones that closed closer to that particular sales date. So you want to make sure, if that makes any sense at all, but make sure your agent, and I'm sure they will if they're vetted in the business, they'll look at those values that makes most sense, and they'll be able to sit down with you and explain that particular process. And finally, I'll talk about those requests for repairs. This typically comes up on also on the buyer side and seller side. These are questions that come in where the client's going to be doing some kind of an inspection of your property. And from the buyer's end of it, you're going to be having a home inspector go out and look at the property. What do you ask for? What do you look for? Typically in the real estate realm, they're looking for things that are health and safety related. The at first glance stuff, that needing paint or having maybe a door handle broken or a knob, if that's not a health and safety item, then usually that's something that's kind of accepted as part of the property because they're making their offer in accordance with the current condition of the property. The home inspection, those are the things that are going to be coming up later and that the buyer might not have been privy to because they're having an expert come in, look at the property, and then they're giving them a written report that they'll be able to include in their request for repairs when their agent fortifies it, puts it together, goes back to the seller's agent. That's why it's good to have your own agent, because now we have a little battle that will ensue. And hopefully that other agent, of course, they'll give it to the seller, but they'll be able to explain to them the nuances of the particular offer where the buyers are requesting particular repairs. So there's a lot of moving parts in real estate. It will always be that way. A lot of people, the sellers, of course, are going to maybe push back depending on what the buyer asks for. If the buyer goes in and the term to use, I guess, would be greedy. Sometimes buyers use the request for repairs as a reason to be able to try to get that sales price lower. And if there's only a few items on it, or items that really don't count towards health and safety issues like repainting, recarpeting, they saw that current condition. A lot of times sellers are going to look at that and say, really, this is ridiculous. And then there's a lot of pushback. You need agents on both sides that are good at navigating that pushback. This discussion about these types of buyers coming out there or these types of seller responses, I'm covering both sides, it's good to have with those particular parties of interest. So if you're representing the seller or being represented by the agent as a seller, that agent should inform you as to how the market happens to be trending and what they've been seeing as of late. If you're working with an agent that's going to represent you as the buyer, that agent also should be able to give you the intel and the details as to what's going on in the real estate market so you can best wrap your mind around what those best strategies might be. And they should be able to refer you to proper strategies so you can make the best decisions, giving you 5 things to look at versus just one or in hopes that you'll figure it out yourself. That's not the role of a real estate agent. The role of a real estate agent should be your buyer and your confidant to a point, or your educator and your confidant to a point where they'll be able to give you the information that you need to make best decisions regarding probably one of the biggest purchases you will make in your life, and that is real estate. Same thing on the seller end of it. That agent should be able to talk to you about the market, talk to you about the buyers that they happen to be seeing at the current time, and also not just who's working with them. Agents talk. We have a lot of large networking groups that we work with, and we hear the stories. We're chummy with other people in the industry to a point. We never want that chumminess. Is that even correct? We never want that relationship to supersede or go above our particular relationship with our buyer or seller. They should be the number one in our world. That's where the income comes in. That's where the referrals come back from. So having those relationships, those with other agents, they should be able to at least work through the mess in the process that is real estate a lot of times. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. A moment of prayer, I think, would be fitting if you're into that sort of thing, which I very much am. And maybe a moment of silence for the people that lost their lives on September 11th. We never want to forget. December 7th always comes and goes. Nobody ever really seems to remember what that was. That was when the 7th Japanese fleet attacked Pearl Harbor. That's these dates. They should be something that we always remember. And that's because we don't want to make the same mistakes again. All right. I'm Connor with Honor. Be well, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.